India's electric vehicle market is gearing up for the fast lane as more and more companies rush into the space. After all, electric two-wheeler sales were nearly up 5 times.
India didn't just grow its electric vehicle market in 2025. It quietly flipped the entire global EV playbook. Sales surged by 77%. Premium electric cars exploded, and Indian brands began delivering better range, faster charging, and lower prices than Tesla. While Toyota stayed cautious with hybrids and Tesla arrived late, India had already moved forward. Did you see this coming? Did Tesla miss the real EV revolution? Is this what affordable electric cars now look like? And most importantly, how did India pull this off without anyone noticing? The 77% shock nobody predicted. It turns out the shift we just talked about was not slow, careful, or polite. It hit like a detonation. In 2025 alone, India's electric vehicle sales didn't creep upward. They exploded by 77% in a single year. That number caught almost everyone off guard, especially analysts who had spent years saying India would take a decade to warm up to EVs. The logic seemed solid at the time. Charging infrastructure was still uneven, battery costs were high, and price-sensitive buyers were expected to move cautiously. But reality took that logic and flipped it on its head. What made this growth so unsettling for the global auto industry was not just the speed, but the shape of it. Most experts expected India to follow the usual path, starting with tiny, bare-bones electric cars built purely to be cheap. That phase barely happened. Instead, buyers jumped straight past it. In just a year, premium electric vehicles priced above 20 lakh rupees surged from a niche 3% of the market to a massive 27%. That is not gradual adoption. That is a behavioral shift. At the same time, something else quietly broke. Demand for ultra-budget electric cars began to collapse. The cheapest models stopped being the dream. Buyers were walking into showrooms, looking at stripped-down EVs with limited range and slow charging, and walking right back out. They were asking different questions now. How far can it really go? How fast can I charge it? Will this still feel modern in 5 years? Suddenly, affordability was not about the sticker price anymore. It was about long-term value. This is where India did something most markets never manage. It skipped the awkward middle step. Instead of slowly training consumers to accept electric compromises, Indian buyers decided they would only switch if the experience felt like an upgrade. That mindset pushed manufacturers in a very specific direction. Better batteries, longer range, faster charging, more features, all at prices that still undercut global giants. And that raises an uncomfortable question for companies watching from the outside. Would you personally choose a bare-bones EV just because it is cheaper? Or would you stretch for one that actually feels future-proof? Is affordability really about paying less today, or about getting more for every year you own the car? And if millions of Indian buyers made that calculation at the same time, what does that say about where the global EV market is heading? Because if buyers were not chasing the cheapest electric cars anymore, what exactly were they buying instead? The EV that changed buyer psychology. That shift in mindset did not happen in theory. It happened in a showroom with one very specific car. The MG Windsor quietly became the best-selling electric vehicle in India in 2025.
MG Windsor EV is currently India's best-selling EV. Pro retains the Windsor EV's unique design with elements
crossing 46,700 units and doing it faster than anyone expected. This was not supposed to happen. For years, the Tata Nexon EV had been the default choice, the safe bet. The EV people bought because there was nothing else that felt trustworthy. Yet in just about 400 days, the Windsor knocked it off the top spot. The reason was not range, design, or even brand loyalty. It was psychology. MG figured out something most EV makers were ignoring. For Indian buyers, the biggest fear was not running out of charge on the road. It was the battery itself. Batteries are expensive, they degrade over time, and they turn resale value into a guessing game. That fear sat quietly in people's minds every time they considered switching to electric. So, MG changed the equation. With battery as a service, buyers did not actually own the battery. They bought the car and paid for a subscription for the battery instead. Suddenly, the most expensive and most uncertain part of the EV was no longer their problem. If the battery degraded, MG handled it. If technology improved, upgrades became easier. The upfront price dropped, but more importantly, the emotional risk disappeared. This is where things get interesting. Buyers who had been hesitating for years suddenly felt comfortable making the jump. Not because the Windsor was the cheapest EV, but because it felt safer. It removed the long-term anxiety that had nothing to do with charging stations and everything to do with ownership fear. Ask yourself honestly, would you feel more confident buying an EV if the battery were not your responsibility? Would that change how you look at electric cars altogether? Now compare that to Tesla. Tesla does not offer battery as a service anywhere. You buy the car, you own the battery, and the long-term risk is yours. That works in markets where buyers are already comfortable with high upfront costs and rapid depreciation. India is not one of those markets. Here, flexibility beats prestige, and peace of mind beats brand hype. The Windsor did not just sell well, it rewired how buyers thought about electric vehicles. It proved that price anxiety mattered more than range anxiety, and that removing one mental barrier could unlock an entire market. Is this approach smarter than Tesla's all-or-nothing ownership model? And if one company could flip buyer psychology this fast, what happens when others start copying it? Because MG was not the only one making bold moves. Another Indian company went straight for Tesla's throat. Mahindra versus Tesla. Same tech, one-third the price. And this is where the story gets quietly uncomfortable for Tesla. Because while MG was changing how Indians feel about EV ownership, Mahindra was changing how EVs are built in the first place. Not by copying Tesla, but by out-optimizing it. Mahindra's secret weapon is something called the InGlow platform. Born electric, not adapted, not modified.
InGlow architecture. This is their skateboard architecture that will motivate all these concept vehicles.
Built from the ground up only for EVs. That detail sounds technical, but it matters more than most people realize. When a car is born electric, everything fits together cleanly. The battery sits lower, the weight is balanced better, the cabin feels roomier, and efficiency improves without needing oversized battery packs. It is engineering that thinks ahead, instead of patching things later. Now look at the XUV 9e, Mahindra's upcoming electric SUV. On paper, it feels almost surreal. You are looking at a vehicle offering close to 500 kilometers of real-world range, dual motor power that pushes output into territory Tesla fans would recognize, and fast charging that can add meaningful range in minutes rather than hours. These are not budget EV numbers. These are Model Y numbers. But here is where the logic turns devastating. A Tesla Model Y, if priced for India, is expected to land somewhere between 60 and 68 lakh rupees once duties, logistics, and margins are factored in. The Mahindra XEV 9e is targeting the 25 lakh rupee sweet spot. Same class, comparable tech, roughly one-third of the price. So, the question becomes unavoidable. At that price difference, does brand still matter? Or does it suddenly feel like you are paying triple just for a logo and a story? Tesla's global strategy relies on scale and premium positioning. That works brilliantly in markets where buyers are already comfortable paying top dollar for tech-forward branding. India works differently. The market rewards efficiency, localization, and long-term ownership logic. Mahindra designs for Indian roads, Indian heat, Indian charging behavior, and Indian cost expectations. Tesla designs for a global average that simply does not exist here. And the deeper issue is architecture. Tesla's strength has always been its vertical integration, but Mahindra's born electric approach allows it to optimize cost without sacrificing performance. Lighter platforms mean smaller batteries can go just as far. Local sourcing reduces costs without cutting corners. Over time, that advantage compounds. So, is Tesla overpriced, or is it just misplaced? Because Mahindra's edge did not start with a sleek design or aggressive pricing. It started much deeper than that, right inside the battery itself. The battery breakthrough that changed everything. And that battery question takes us to the quietest but most powerful shift of all. India stopped waiting for the world to supply its EV future and started building its own power, quite literally. For years, lithium-ion batteries were treated like the only serious option. They worked.
Lithium iron phosphate battery pack has almost 4 to 5 times the life. It's also a safer chemistry.
But they came with baggage. Lithium is expensive, mostly imported, and sensitive to heat. In a country where summers regularly push past 40 degrees and millions of cars sit all day, that matters. This is why India leaned hard into LFP batteries. Lithium iron phosphate is not flashy, but it is stable, safer, cheaper, and far more tolerant of heat. The energy density is slightly lower, but the lifespan is longer, and the real-world reliability is higher. For Indian roads and Indian weather, LFP simply makes more sense. This is one reason Indian EVs started getting cheaper without feeling compromised. When your battery lasts longer and fails less often, ownership costs drop quietly over time. That saving does not show up on a spec sheet, but buyers feel it. Then came something nobody expected to move this fast: sodium-ion batteries. Instead of relying on lithium, sodium uses materials that are abundant and locally available. That alone changes the economics. But the real shock was the charging speed. Indian researchers demonstrated sodium-ion batteries that can charge up to 80% in around 6 minutes. Let that sink in for a moment. Would 6-minute charging erase your last EV doubt? Would it finally make electric cars feel as convenient as petrol? Sodium-ion also handles heat better, reduces fire risk, and cuts dependence on global supply chains. This is not just tech progress, it is strategic independence. Battery chemistry becomes a national advantage when you are no longer at the mercy of global price swings or shipping delays. And India is not stopping there. Solid-state batteries are already on the roadmap. These promise higher energy density, even faster charging, and far greater safety by removing liquid electrolytes entirely. While solid-state is still a few years away from mass adoption, India is positioning itself early, testing, scaling, and learning while others wait. Now, contrast this with Tesla. Tesla's battery supply is still heavily tied to imported materials and global factories. That works when volumes are predictable and margins are high. In a price-sensitive market like India, it becomes a weakness. When batteries are local, costs fall faster and innovation accelerates. So here is the real question. Is battery technology the true EV battlefield, not design or branding? And if India cracked this piece first, who really holds the long-term advantage? Because even the best batteries do not matter if cars stay expensive. So how did Tata manage to make EVs affordable at a massive scale? Tata's silent weapon: vertical integration. By owning everything, Tesla imports. This is the part nobody really talks about because it is not flashy, and it does not look good in launch videos. But behind India's EV surge sits something far more powerful than a single car or battery breakthrough. Tata did not just build electric vehicles. Tata built the entire universe around them. Inside the group, they quietly call it the Uni-everse. And no, it is not marketing poetry. It is literal. Tata Motors designs the car. Tata Autocomp builds critical components. Tata Power controls charging infrastructure. Tata Steel supplies the metal. Tata Chemicals works on battery materials. And Tata Consultancy Services writes the software that connects it all. What most automakers buy, Tata already owns. That changes everything. When a global brand builds an EV, It negotiates with suppliers, ships parts across oceans, absorbs currency shocks, and waits in line when supply chains tighten. Tata skips most of that. Components move across internal companies, costs are controlled early, and margins are protected before the car even reaches production. This is how Tata quietly cuts costs by 50 to 80% across the EV life cycle without stripping features or range. And this is why Tata EVs feel oddly underpriced for what they offer. Now, look at charging. Tata Power has already rolled out one of India's largest fast-charging networks.
India is one of leading fast charging. More than 200 electric vehicles can be charged here.
Placed exactly where Indian drivers actually travel. Highways, cities, office parks, and residential hubs. Not aspirational dots on a map, but chargers people can use today. Tesla's supercharger network works beautifully where Tesla controls the market. In India, Tesla would have to start from scratch or depend on partners. Tata already owns the grid. So ask yourself this: is Tesla struggling in India because of demand or because it does not control the ecosystem? Would you trust an EV more if the same group built the car, the battery, the software, and the charger it plugs into? Now here is where Toyota runs into a wall. Toyota's strength has always been manufacturing excellence and hybrid efficiency, but it does not own a domestic battery pipeline. It does not control the national charging infrastructure, and it cannot vertically integrate at Tata's scale without years of restructuring. Even Toyota cannot compress decades of ecosystem building into a few quarters. This is not about who builds better cars. This is about who owns the ground beneath them. So, if India has already cracked cost, trust, and technology at the system level, what does that mean for Toyota and Tesla right now? Why Toyota and Tesla didn't see this coming. And this is where the story quietly clicks into place. Toyota and Tesla did not fail to understand electric vehicles. They failed to understand India. Because while both companies were solving real problems, they were solving yesterday's problems, not the ones India was actually prioritizing. Toyota made a careful, logical bet on hybrids. Cleaner than petrol, no charging anxiety, familiar ownership. In many markets, that strategy still makes sense. But India moved the goalposts. Government incentives, tax benefits, and long-term policy signals began favoring fully electric vehicles only. Not partially electric, not transitional tech, pure EVs. That single decision reshaped the market overnight. Hybrids suddenly sat in an awkward middle space where they were too expensive to be mass market and not electric enough to qualify for serious support. Toyota was not wrong. It was just early to the wrong future. Tesla's problem ran in the opposite direction. Tesla understands EVs better than almost anyone, but it entered India late, cautiously, and with limits that clashed with how the market works.
Tesla is now set to roll on the streets of the national capital after its mega launch in Mumbai, marking a major step in its India entry.
Early plans focused on a handful of major cities, premium buyers, and imported vehicles. That is not how India scales. India scales through reach, localization, and trust built across millions of first-time buyers. Tesla's model works when demand already exists. In India, demand had to be unlocked first. And that brings us to trust, which quietly got redefined in the EV era. Trust used to mean engine reliability, resale value, and service history. In electric vehicles, trust means something different. It means battery longevity, charging access, software stability, and the feeling that the company will still be around to support you years later. Indian brands stepped into that gap early. Tata, Mahindra, and MG became familiar faces in the EV transition, not distant global icons. Policy played a bigger role than most people realize. India stayed remarkably consistent. Incentives were not flipped on and off with election cycles. Infrastructure investment kept flowing. Local manufacturing was rewarded. That stability gave domestic companies confidence to invest long-term. In contrast, Western EV markets have lurched between subsidies and rollbacks, creating hesitation and whiplash. India picked a direction and stayed there. So, reliability shifted. It stopped being about who had the longest legacy and started being about who showed up, built locally, and stayed visible. Indian brands now own that narrative. They are seen as dependable, not because they are perfect, but because they are present. So ask yourself this: did Toyota choose the wrong path, or was the path rewritten under its feet? Should Tesla fully localize and rethink its approach? Or is India simply not built for Tesla's current playbook? And if trust is now earned through ecosystems instead of logos, can global brands ever catch up? Because if this model works in India, where does it spread next? And this is where the story really lands. India did not just make cheap electric cars. It quietly built a system where cost, trust, charging, and scale all moved together. Tesla showed up expensive. Toyota showed up uncertain. Meanwhile, Indian EV makers are already tuning this model for export, eyeing markets that look a lot like India did 5 years ago. So, here's the real pause point. Can this EV blueprint work across Africa or Southeast Asia? Will Tesla adapt its playbook or step back? Did India just rewrite the future of electric cars? And if this is the new standard, who is actually ready for what comes next?